stand by. We're about to go live.
Okay. So again, how is the general public going to see this?
Good evening, everyone. I am so sorry if you were looking on Facebook. We had a few technical difficulties tonight, so we are streaming live to YouTube, and also that is going directly to my website. We have some lovely volunteers who are working diligently and quickly on Facebook to let everybody know what those links are if you are watching. So with that being said, I would like to introduce myself and welcome you all this evening. My name is Arianna Barrios, and I am the newly elected representative for District 1 in the City of Orange on the Orange City Council. I have a number of guests with me this evening for this town hall, and we're going to try and take as many questions as we possibly can. But a few things that I just wanted to tell you about why we're here tonight. And I think many of you already know, but it doesn't hurt to kind of share the information that we're trying to get out tonight. Mainly, I think all of us has seen this really almost, just in the last few months, very quick proliferation of student housing in our neighborhoods that's particularly being allowed to grow due to loopholes or basically going against the spirit of the laws about ADUs or accessory dwelling units. And it's not just the initial news that got out to a lot of our neighbors was particular to Cambridge Street. This is happening in several areas. And the reason we invited people from all over the city to hear our conversation tonight is because while it's starting in and around Chapman Chapman University, and I'm sorry, I date myself by saying that, but while it's, seems to be concentrated around Chapman University, it really isn't. It's really an issue that is going to, if not already, will affect all of our city. So with that, I would like to introduce our neighborhood leader, Mike Cash, who is really the one who alerted a lot of us to this issue and what was going on in his area of Orange. So Mike, welcome. Thank you so much for being willing to do this tonight.
Well, thanks, Arianna. I'm not really sure if anyone is seeing this at this point. I'm a little concerned about that, but in so much as these ADU issues are coming up, there's one company in particular around Cambridge that is buying up properties and turning them into dorms, mini dorms, if you will. And we're very concerned about that. They're taking 2 and 3 bedroom homes and turning them into 10-bedroom houses without kitchens and other living facilities, and stacking them with kids, with college kids, and no parking, no additional parking. Cambridge has parking restrictions, so that's an issue.
Right.
And the goal tonight is to get a step forward in reducing the building of these facilities in Orange, especially on Cambridge, because that's where I live, but throughout the city of Orange, and specifically, it looks like District 1 right now is where they're really pushing.
Mm-hmm.
So many of you have gotten information that I've started out sending, and emails and info. You really have to get with your city leaders, council members, staff, and tell them what the issues are, what your problems are with this. And then we can kind of go from there and get a stop to this. Back to you, Arianna.
Well, let me ask you, because I have not had the opportunity to go through any of these houses. But when we talk about that, and I know one of your flyers pointed out some of the particular properties that were under what we've all seen the pictures for, the Young Lewin investment houses. So when you say that there's 10 or multiple students, I think one on the flyer said 20 students. Can you tell me a little bit? Have you walked through any of those properties, or is it just you're looking at the permits?
I have not walked through the properties. I've looked at the Young Lewin website. Mm-hmm. It has aerial pictures and descriptions of the properties. The one at 570 North Cambridge is a 10 bedroom, 10 bath house. They don't really have any kitchen facilities, but they do have a ton of bedrooms and baths. They did not, to my understanding, they did not have to put any fire sprinklers in, and they converted the garage to a game room. So there's no parking in there. And they have, their driveway holds 2 cars. Because of the parking restrictions on Cambridge, they can't park cars out on the street during the day, on weekdays during the day.
Now, let me just back up a little bit, because we should be really clear for folks, because I know that there are a lot of people who maybe are new to this issue in terms of the ADUs. So accessory dwelling units, or what most of us tend to think of as granny flats, have been around for a long time, but there have been restrictions about where you can build them, how big they can be, how many you can have, and a lot of that's changed. And we have 2 people who are going to help us understand that, and I really want to get into that. And for what Mike is saying, and Mike, thank you, we're going to have a lot of resources, and after the show, if you're not able to watch tonight because of our technical issues, we will be reposting this video again, and we'll post it to all the different sites so people can get the same information. But joining me tonight also is an expert planner, Adrian Gladson, so former City of Orange Planning Commissioner. And Adrian, if first of all, welcome and thank you for joining me.
Thank you. It's an honor, Councilwoman. Yes. And my name, I couldn't change K to Adrian. So people, it is Adrian. My stepmother was using my computer and I can't switch it back, but it's an honor to be with you. And this is an issue dear to my heart. It was something that got raised in the election for mayor this last year. But it really speaks to the fact that the key to your city is really good planning and understanding what you're doing in public policy making. And yes, that does include engagement with the state, includes a lot of engagement in my opinion. And it also means that we have to know what we're talking about and we have to know what the facts are. So you're right in that ADUs are not new. In fact, when I moved to Orange in 1986, I lived in one and then I moved to another one. So the key issue now is that we've seen, in my opinion, we've seen some poor planning decisions at the state level on relaxing the standards too far. And for me, it's issues on parking, it's issues on density, and it really disregards our general plan. And sadly, I was on the Planning Commission in 2018 when all of this was done. And I think we just didn't go up there and really know what we were talking about and get engaged on this issue. And personally, as you know, you're a council member now, the members of our council need to advocate for us in Sacramento, but in a thoughtful way, in a correct way, in a policy level way, and bring the facts forward. Parking, basically moving these things forward without requirements for parking is just poor planning.
Right. And I think what's really interesting is that the rules, as they were slackened, specifically as it pertains to ADUs, I've seen a lot of comments, and I know, Mike, you can attest to this, a lot of comments with people asking, how can this be happening? And I want to set the record straight on this because it's really important for everyone to know this, that the rules as they stand right now with the 2 different types of housing we're talking about, ADUs, accessory dwelling units or granny units, and a junior ADU. And a junior ADU is when you take area that's already within the footprint of a house. So say you have a bonus room on a single family home, or you have a garage and you convert that into livable space, particularly bedrooms. That's a junior ADU. And a regular ADU is something that is separate, a granny unit off of the house. So I'd like to introduce my other guest, one of my other guests, Nathan Forrest, who is an engineer by training and another neighborhood leader, but who really has been looking at our city code, really digging into, what it says about these types of planning issue, building issues, really. So Nathan, thank you so much for joining me.
Well, thank you so much for having me on this evening. Yes, I I did do quite a bit of looking through the Orange Municipal Code, and as well at the language as adopted in the state legislature pertaining to Assembly Bill 68. And I think that the answers are already there in black and white. I have some PowerPoint slides I can share that would enable people to read. And, I promise Scouts Honor, there's nothing weird in here. It's all black and white text from the from the Orange Municipal Code and from AB 68.
Okay.
In a court decision pertaining to it. And so we'll just walk through these, and I'm happy to share this presentation if anybody wants to read the sections themselves. This is all online. This is all open source.
And I do want to share with everybody not to worry if we say something or if there's a link or a PowerPoint slide that just like, oh my goodness, I didn't see it. We will post all this up afterwards in a number of places so everybody has the same information.
Great. And so I started by taking a look in the Orange Municipal Code. This is the code that governs the city. These are, in my humble opinion, the rules that we all agree to live by and abide by here in the city. The rules that I have, what I believe is a reasonable expectation that city planning and city government, et cetera, is enforcing. And so first of all, it came to the definition here of a boarding house. It's a residence or dwelling other than hotel, wherein 3 or more rooms are rented under 3 or more separate written or oral agreements. So I think that if we take a look at what Lewin Capital says that they're doing, it meets the definition of a boarding house. And this is text from their website that I've posted here. You are welcome to come and take a look at it if you like. But essentially it says it's a 6-bed, 6-bath house expansion and a 4-bed, 4-bath ADU. And it's pre-leased at $83.40 a month or $13.90 per bedroom. So I'm not certain whether that actually means that they leased each individual bedroom or not. That's not clear to me.
Well, Nathan, and in reality, could they not put, like, if they made that many bedrooms? So to Mike's point earlier, if you made 10 bedrooms, you could technically put bunk beds in there and have.
You could have 20 people in there.
20 people in there.
I mean, maybe you could put 2 bunks in each room and have 40 people in there.
Right.
I don't know. I don't know where the limit is on this, but what I was going to come to next is that there's another definition here that's interesting that's about communal housing. And then it describes a non-family group with common kitchen and dining facilities, but without mental psychiatric care. And a communal housing includes boarding houses. And so I think that this section makes moot the question of whether or not the rooms are individually leased.
Right.
Because a boarding house, under the definition that we have here in the city, a communal house is a boarding house for the purposes of this section of the code. And so I don't think it matters whether the leases are individual or not individual. It meets the definition of a boarding house. And when I look a little bit further in Title 17, among the permitted uses for the residential zoning that North Cambridge Street is R16, as is, I believe, the zoning of all of the other properties around the city on Waverly and others. When you look in that table, which section 17.13.030 is a table of permitted uses.
Right.
If you look under that zoning designation, boarding and lodging houses is not a permitted use. So in my mind, it's a pretty black and white case of a land use that's already not allowed. And so we can move on in case there was any question about, it being, backing up a half a second here, whether it's a question about it being a boarding house, a lodging house, a dormitory, a fraternity, a sorority house. If we look further down in 17.13.060, any use not listed in 1713-030 as a permitted use or accessory use is not prohibited, or sorry, excuse me, is prohibited. And so all of these other categories that might be questionable, going back again, lodging houses, dormitories, fraternities, and sorority houses, they are also not permitted. And we know from interactions on part of Mike Cash with the residents over there and from the Young Lewin Capital website that they have a fraternity living in that 10-bedroom house at 552 North Cambridge. So on multiple fronts, this is already an unacceptable use. And I have a lot of questions about how it came to be approved at the city.
Well, one of the things I find really interesting that you put up there, and I think a lot of us have seen this online with what Young Lewin has been doing, is that just kind of backing up to give everybody the opportunity to understand how we got here. And I want to be specific, not how we got here as the city of Orange, because Orange in a lot of ways is a victim of what's going on at the state of California. And basically what we're looking at is that I think most people have heard the term housing crisis, that there is a housing crisis in the state of California, that we do not have enough housing for our residents all across the state. At all different levels of housing. So with that, we had, our regular, yearly assessments of where we are in housing. How much housing do we need? And I want to say, Adrian, you can correct me if I'm wrong, 2 or 3 years ago, the new housing assessment that came out was almost triple what had been year after year in terms of regular growth. It was an enormous number. So we went from having about 1 million, 1.3 million needs of units of housing of all different types, to jumping to about 3.5 million units of housing. And then the state dictates that pain is spread out all through the country, all through the state. So when you have a dramatic increase like that, that all of a sudden says that, everybody has to have a crunch in housing, it's a crisis. What do we do? So our legislature, galvanized to action, starts looking at what can we do in terms of housing policy? Where is the problem? And a lot of the problem was deemed to be in Southern California. So, and what happens then is we get exceptional numbers that we are supposed to meet as municipalities. And then that's coupled with new state laws like these ADU laws that then put a double burden on local cities, because we can't fight back as easily as we might have in the past. And before I go too far, Adrian, did I characterize that correctly? Did I want to let everybody know the bigger picture here?
So the hard part with the discussion, Arianna, is there's a couple of different pieces that need to be almost trifurcated, if that's such a word. You got bifurcate and trifurcate. You've got, we know there's 40 million, we have about 40 million Californians in the state. And we can look at pro forma, we can look at the actuary numbers, and we can figure out how many are children and young adults and when new kids are going to come, and eventually go to 18 and 20 and need housing units to live in. I do believe, and there is clear evidence that we do have a housing shortage. Where the dispute has been is how big. And that's the number we need to figure out at the state level. And then we can plan accordingly. And I think what you're talking about already is that the numbers earlier that got rolled out were too big, and we really need to hone in on what the growth factor is. How does it all play out with what we really do need? So you're trying to plan for growth, you're trying to plan for need, and then you're looking where our land is left. I mean, basically everybody, land is sacred and is scarce in California. It's also sacred.
Right.
We don't really have much left to build on. So, and the parts that are left are either protected because they're environmentally sensitive.
Right.
They're important. So we're looking at infill. So we're trying to look at a number of different pieces and figure out how we can best plan for it. The ADU piece, in my opinion, is a small trickle in the bucket, because it's not going to give you the yield of other kinds of housing units that might be in a different type, like a, high rise or mid rise. But what the state, and again, I don't want to get into too much of this, into much of the detail and too much of the weeds.
Right.
Frankly, back in the day in the 70s, ADUs were restricted unnecessarily, not in the city of Orange. And I want to stress that again, not in the city of Orange, other parts of the state, other parts of Orange County, they were very much restricted. The state did want to come in and try to flexibly allow for those opportunities.
Mhm.
In our city, we've always had this at allowed use. We required parking. And I lived, like I said earlier, in 2 of them. So it's really trying to figure out what the right fit is, how to make them work. And we had a good model. And because other players, other cities, other communities really weren't seeing these on the ground, the state probably came in a heavier hand. And in my opinion, stepped into a game of taking away the one barrier that most developers can't achieve when they do these, which is parking.
Right.
So by eliminating the parking, oh, well, I can get rid of the garage now and turn that into a junior ADU. And that parking, I guess, just goes away. Well, we all know that's not practical. So
Well, and I think one of the things that really concerns me about all of this is that, the whole idea that everybody was sold in terms of the ADUs and the junior ADUs and allowing, everything that, Nathan was talking about is that the idea was that if we did this, it would allow us to create affordable housing because you would have additional units on a property where, maybe, grandma and grandpa in their retirement could rent out a back unit, or, as a younger family, grandma and grandpa could move to the back unit, and therefore freeing up, entry-level housing, creating affordable housing opportunities. But what we're seeing in the city of Orange, and Mike, I think I'd love for you to chime in. We are not seeing affordable housing. That is not what's happening here. In fact, I would say that the housing that's being created is a very affluent housing when you look at the numbers that Young Lewin is posting for these places.
Well, and I agree with that. This is not the intent of AB 68 to create dormitory and student housing. That's not the intent of the law.
No, not at all.
Unfortunately, they're taking advantage of a loophole here and putting, 10 bedroom, 10 bath, 12 bedroom, 12 bath properties, facilities together on a property in a residential area with no parking. And we're ending up with the neighborhoods are dying from this.
Right.
It seemed to be going after families that have been around a long time, and maybe the owner has passed and the kids want to sell the house, and they're paying a premium on the property, but they're spending so much money that they have to charge a fair amount for rent.
Right.
And they've got to put all these people in these properties.
Well, and additionally, it's pricing out, because you're talking about investors versus families, it's pricing out families.
Yes.
It is, but it's also killing the property values of the local residents because now you're living across the street from 3 dormitories.
Right.
So they can now, the capital companies can now come in and lowball the residents on their property.
Right. So you create a self-fulfilling prophecy.
We've seen that happen already on Cambridge.
Right.
And it's unfortunate.
I wanted to give Nate a chance because we have his screen up right now. So Nate, we cut you off before you could finish your presentation. So I want to let you get back to it.
That's all right. That was an important discussion and I'm glad we had it. I just had a couple more things to look at here, specifically pertaining to AB 68. This section of the California government code 65852.22. This is kind of the second half of the codification of AB 68, and it addresses junior accessory dwelling units, but you're going to find the same language in the section that addresses ADUs. I just didn't get them both onto my PowerPoint here. But there's a couple of interesting points in here, and I've underlined it here at the bottom. It pertains to the city of Orange, in this case, establishing ordinances regarding ADUs and junior ADUs. And the language that was to be adopted by the city, I'll highlight it here, shall do, or maybe I won't highlight it because it doesn't work that way, but it shall do all of the following. So for one, it'll allow a junior ADU in a single family residence with single family residence built or proposed to be built on the lot. Well, I think we've already established that that's not a single family residence. You know, a sixplex or a 10plex with individual leases does not meet the definition of a single family residence. And finally, this is same section continued. One I found potentially even more interesting is that it also requires owner occupancy in the single family residence. So is someone from Young Lewin Capital going to live in this house? I mean, I don't think that they are. And so it's just another way that this is not following AB 68, and it's also not following the Orange Municipal Code.
Well,
And the
and
last
I
thing
think
that I
you
had to
have a
share
really
here,
good point there that we need to talk about.
the last thing I wanted to share is a very old summary from a court case in San Mateo County from 1962. And essentially, it was Frank Brady versus the Superior Court of San Mateo County. And they basically broke it down what the meaning of single family dwelling means. The word single precludes the separate segregation of certain portions or rooms for rental, and the dwelling cannot be fragmentized into broken bits of housing for rental return. The family signifies living as a family and inhibits the breaking up of the premises into segregated units. So here we've got almost 60-year-old case law in California, and we're still, you know, debating this and arguing this. I mean, I think it's an open and shut deal here, and I can't for the life of me fathom how it is that the city came to approve this.
So, so you bring up a couple of good points that I want to go back over to, and that's about, you know, who is managing, who lives in these properties. So one of the things that certainly we as a city can look at is there a different, can you treat managed properties different than you do where you have, you know, an owner living there? So that's certainly a question that I would have for city staff and something that I'll bring up. And for our audience tonight, a couple of things, because we want you to be able to ask questions because we want to keep a record of them so I can take them back to City Hall and get them answered. But two, also because if we can, we're going to try and get to as many questions as possible, although I know we have juggled around a little tonight in terms of where we're at versus Facebook versus YouTube. But if you have questions, you can post them on YouTube in the chat feature, or you could email them at info@vote-barrios, that's vote, spelled just like it sounds, and Barrios, BARRIOS.com, info@votebarrios.com, and we will try to get to as many as we can tonight. But with everything that Nate, that you just brought up, I want to, you know, make sure that I have a couple of things that people should know, because if the rules about ADUs were bad, what's coming up right behind it, and it's going to be debated in the state capitol this year, is actually, if you can believe it, worse. And that would be SB 9 and SB 10. And that's why it's going to be really important. And Mike's going to share a little bit with you later about getting involved, getting engaged, and writing letters, and keeping, you know, building a coalition of people who can come forward and make their voices be heard, because our legislators, our local electeds, we all need to be a part of this solution. So SB 9 and SB 10 actually takes the whole ADU concept to a whole nother nuclear level. And it would allow you to actually have 6 separate units on a property. And I think maybe even, Adrian, you can correct me, it might even be up to 8 units on a single family property. And it would basically, for all intents and purposes, remove R1 zoning and single family resident protections statewide.
Yeah, there's a number of bills that are just in the legislature. They're just ideas. And we as residents and members of the community need to go read them, go through them like Nathan has, and we need to go tell our council what we think of them, and we should be advocating. Yes, there is a mindset of folks who do think that an R1 neighborhood should be jettisoned, and I think we should be open enough to let them tell us why and listen to their side of the story. And there may be some reasons why they're doing it that are helpful for us to understand. But I think they also don't completely get the ramifications of it.
Right.
So our job, and you as a decision maker and elected, Arianna, is to really get into the minutia of that and really understand what the implications are of these
Right.
decisions. And we need to be lobbying up there. Again, I said earlier, not waving our hands like, wild people, crazy people. Let's come at this intelligently, thoughtfully, engaging in good decision making, good planning. Those are things, in my opinion, I think we're going to have to show them.
Yeah.
If we really, let me just throw this number at everybody, and this is a big number. I mean, we have about 28,000 single family lots roughly in Orange. So obviously 28,000 people are not going to build an ADU and a junior ADU because it's going to cost you money. But even if 15% or 10%, you get the implications. That's staggering. And so those are the kind of data bits that we're going to have our staff help us with, have our planning staff look at, and come at this with a solution.
Right. And I think it's important to say that this is a nonpartisan issue.
Absolutely.
Because I think, when we look at it, I think there are a lot of people who would agree that we need to provide housing to the residents of California. It's one of the reasons people are leaving. But when you look at the numbers, to your point, a thoughtful discussion about those numbers of what they're saying we need. At the same time, we have declining birth rates. We have declining school enrollments. We have declining enrollments in our colleges and universities. So where is this demand? And you don't have to be mean about it. It's a discussion. We have to have a discussion.
Let's talk about it. And Nate mentioned earlier, the other component, which is what I meant with the different bucket discussions.
Mm-hmm.
When it's a dormitory or it's a boarding house, by definition, and if it meets that definition, it is that.
Yes.
You
and
can't.
that is different than just, okay, you can build your ADUs, but if you go over to be a boarding house, you're a boarding house. It just is what it is.
So applicants, you're going to have to tell us the truth.
Exactly.
And if you don't, there may be grounds for the city to deny your application. We may look at bedrooms and 5 bedrooms and 10, all of those numbers. And again, I don't want to beat this. I'll finish with this. We know that we can't ban ADUs, and I don't think we want to in the city of Orange. They are like I said, they are a viable option for a homeowner, a property owner who wants to go to the expense to build them. But because we have this other issue of student demand for housing, it's created this vacuum.
Right.
And
that's a really good point to bring up some critical information, because I want to be really fair. And we do have a couple of questions that have come through, so I want to touch base on those too. So the city, because of Mike and Nate and everybody else, I first of all want to thank you all for, getting involved, getting out in front, telling people to write letters and to, for the city to get on the stick, because I can tell you unequivocally that the city is hearing you. Absolutely, they are hearing you. And to that end, on Tuesday at our next city council meeting, the mayor, and I don't want to steal his thunder, but the mayor has asked for ADUs to be put onto our council agenda. And I'm going to read some highlights. Again, I don't want to steal anybody's thunder, but the city manager is going to be reading a report and bringing forward some ideas about how we can deal with this. So, Adrian, you bring up some good points. As I was brainstorming myself, I was thinking, well, if you just made all of Orange, or it's certainly all of District 1 permit parking, this issue may get solved real quick. So, but part of what we need to do here is we can't throw up our hands and say it's just Sacramento. We can't just say, well, we're giving up. However, what we do need to do, and this is where I'm so grateful to you, Mike, is we need to build a coalition and demanding task force, demanding public hearings about this and workshops, and be creative and start bringing together diverse groups of people to say, what can we do? What can we do to fight this? I don't want to speak for you, Mike.
No, and actually, we from the beginning, we've really been pushing for the residents, the voters, the citizens of Orange to contact your representatives, Arianna, the mayor, council, staff, building department, code enforcement, police, whatever, and make your opinion known. The squeaky wheel gets the oil, and start demanding. We need to be proactive on this, not reactive.
Right.
And so, some of the ideas that have popped up are, moratorium on these until we get a better handle, and Orange can pass their own ADU ordinance to help some of this. The demand from Chapman University of housing is huge, and they're coming into requesting more population of students, more enrollment. They're the demand. They're not involved in this particularly, but they created the demand. The intent of use. The intent of AB 68 was never to create student housing.
No.
It was to create housing for families and maybe low income and so on, but it wasn't to create housing for fraternities and sororities and a bunch of college kids. The conditional use permit issue, where this is a business, they should have a conditional use permit and a business license, and they have neither.
Well, and that's where we get into the issue that it's a managed property versus a where there's an owner occupied with some rental.
It's a business.
It's a business.
It's a business, and it equates to any business in the city of Orange has restrictions. They put up big banners on the front of these houses, which alerted us to this. And when we contacted the owners about it, they said, well, we like our banners. Well, it's a residential area. And they were forced to take them down.
And you actually, Mike, alerted me to the fact, and I didn't realize this, and I just want to share with this. Thank you, everybody who's sending in questions and comments, because those are coming through. If you see my eyes twitching, it's because I'm reading your comments on here, and it is truly the way what everybody is saying. It is all over the city. So it's Oakmont on the other side of the 55. It's Madison, Waverly, Cambridge, Sycamore. I'm trying to read all of them, but everyone has said my neighborhood, my neighborhood, my neighborhood. So right. This is truly very quickly becoming a citywide issue.
It's a huge issue.
And with that, I do want to, again, in the interest of fairness, I right when you first started posting about this, about 2 or 3 weeks ago, Mike?
Yeah, it's been 3 weeks now.
3 weeks. So I happened to have a scheduled conversation with Daniele Strupa and the community relations liaison at Chapman University. And so I had the opportunity to say, hey, have you seen this? This is a really big issue. What do you think about that? So I had the opportunity to talk with them about this emerging issue right at the moment that you were alerting everybody to it. And I want to share with everybody, because Chapman is very much on the side of the neighbors about this issue, because if this is allowed to proliferate and grow, it does several things that are actually destructive as far as Chapman is concerned. One, a lot of their professors live in the neighborhoods. A lot of their administrators live in the neighborhoods. They don't want to live next to these types of properties either. Two, as President Strupa said to me, that they want kids in the dorms. One, it's a revenue stream for them. So it's really disappointing that, predatory investors are doing this in the neighborhoods and pulling kids out of what would otherwise be a much safer and much more enriched environment for them if they were using student housing. And Chapman has, not to the extent that I think a lot of us in Old Town would like, but they have made a concerted effort to build student housing. So I just want to read, just so that, again, so I'm totally fair. This is a statement from Chapman University that as they were going back and forth. Chapman University has no affiliation with Young Lewin, nor did we give permission to use our name or images to imply otherwise. Additionally, we are not promoting these homes to Chapman students, and I did verify that. If you go to Chapman Housing, if you're a student and you're looking for housing, Young Lewin is not there. These homes are not there. As a university, we have made a commitment to the community to house a minimum of 50% of our students in official Chapman housing. We've made significant investment in housing options that have increased our junior and senior students choosing to live on campus by 175%. We understand the neighborhood's frustrations and we share them. We take our role as a member of the Orange community very seriously, and we are taking real action to play a positive role in the city. And it then provides a link, which I will share later in the comments, for chapman.edu, campus services, community relations. So there are links and email addresses for you to chime in there. But I don't think it's any secret that Chapman has their specific plan alteration coming through to the city in the next couple of months. So this is certainly not helping that in terms of our relations. They had worked very hard to build better relations, and now we're at a different place. Mike, wouldn't you say?
We are, and I've talked to Chapman also, and I've talked to their security people, I've talked to community relations, and I've suggested that because they require first and second year students, freshmen and sophomore, to live on campus, that maybe they could put in some requirements that the third and fourth year students stay away from these types of houses or something to that effect, and not create these problems in the neighborhood, reduce their demand. They're not necessarily wanting to do that, but there's still a discussion that could potentially come of it down the road. They created the demand, as most of the residents realize. They're not involved with Young and Lewin, but they created the demand, and so that's trying to reduce that demand one way or the other is really key to this. I think if we can make this not cost effective for these investors to come in and build a 10 or 20 room house, if we can make it not cost effective,
right,
from a demand standpoint, then we're 90% of the way home. Because nobody's going to build these units for dorms if they can't make their money back.
right, right.
Well, and to that end, and my opinion is that it should be made very clear to these developers and potential developers that, an illegal land use like this in a residential area is not going to be tolerated. And so save your money. Don't invest in a house that you're then not going to be allowed to use, because it's not a winning situation for anybody.
Absolutely.
Right.
And there's nothing that really can be done with these units, these properties, if the kids aren't in there. It's not like you can move a family in there. There's no kitchen.
Right.
There's, it's a dorm. You could use maybe a rehab thing, but they've got to get licensed, and that doesn't work necessarily either.
Well, and Mike, you and I talked earlier today about that. Based on the usage that and the design that they're building into these houses, it's a very kind of similar scenario to what happened to the motel up on Lincoln. That
right.
I think it was 3 or 4 years that the Planning Commission and the code enforcement were going after for those of you who don't know, a birthing hotel, birthing tourism hotel. That had been completely gutted inside to have all these little rooms and was just completely out of code.
Well, it's the intent of use.
Yes.
AB 68 was intended for creating housing. It wasn't intended for college dorms for they're living there 9 months out of the year.
It
And
was
then,
never intended to create a dorm. It was
Yeah.
intended for cities that wouldn't allow somebody to build a granny flat or enclose a portion of the garage that wasn't needed for parking to house, your stepmom, your mother-in-law. Hell, to house a college student. I don't even know that that's really a problem, but creating a dormitory in place of a single family residence where it was never intended and was never allowed is just unacceptable.
And,
correct. We all agree on that one.
Let me ask you, I want to be able to get some people's questions and pose them to you. So one of the questions that came through was the cost of impact fees for an ADU is between $15,000 to $30,000. Is that fee regulated by the city or state? And Adrian or Nate, do you know by chance?
as I understand the new provisions for ADUs, the junior ADU cannot have any fees connected with impact.
Well,
Okay.
and if in the case of one of the units here on Cambridge, they added 500 square feet to the house and then
Right.
added on an ADU, which means they didn't have to pay the school tax either. Anything over
Interesting.
500 square feet add on onto your home, you've got to pay a fee to the Orange Unified,
Right.
and they're getting away from that also.
Okay. I didn't think about that. That's a good point.
So there's a barrier that this is the barrier of what folks tell the state is it's too expensive for me to build an ADU because I'm going to have to pay for this impact fee and this fee and this fee. And the cost of building the ADU is really the major expense. And
Right.
they're not going to be cheap to build. I mean, if you want to build if you want to build one that doesn't last 50 years, I suppose you can construct a cheaper version of them. But it's going to cost you money. That's why
Right.
this investor group that has apparently the cash can come in and do this and kind of slip through, as Nate said earlier. And the barriers, there probably is a break on the impacts for these types of units, but it should be prorated. I don't think
Right.
it should be not because they are gonna get subsidized by the rest of us because they're gonna cost money for us to service them.
Well, and I think that that's one of the things that they were arguing in terms of the laws at the state level, that by removing those impact fees without, asking about use, instead of incentivizing for either affordable or, you're bringing in an elderly or senior couple, that you really basically set up market rate housing that
Right.
was going to become an investment gold mine.
Right, exactly. And
So now
that's
we have the Wild West.
no, I agree. And I think by calling this what it is, it does separate it from the ADU issue. And granted, I'll be real blunt. We knew that ADU changes in law were coming in effect on January 1st of 2020.
Right.
We at the city level, at the council level, and Arianna, you weren't on the council. We could have been educating our community back in 2019 about these changes. And in 18, we could have been up there lobbying. We knew
Right.
they were on the horizon, and particularly bring those matters forward to our legislators. It really is a state thing that we can work with them and come back and say, instead of, and I know Mike said this too, being proactive instead of reactive and knowing what the dominoes will be.
Right.
That's
Well, and I have some notes for a slide that I'm not sure, I'm sure I could put it up at the end, but I wanted everybody to know who our state representatives are. I would really like to host another one of these town halls with one of our state representatives where we can talk about this. Because I think you're right, Adrian. As I said earlier, it's a nonpartisan issue, but we have to talk about what these impacts are. Another good example is that there is no provision in the rules, in the new rules for historic homes, for historic districts, which have overlays that are federal. So they don't even mother up in that respect. But again, I want to give people some questions because we've gotten a lot of them.
Go ahead.
Another question is, can the city put a cap on enrollment at Chapman in order to remove the demand for these dorms? And certainly that is something that the city could do. And I think that's going to be a big area of discussion with the new specific plan that's coming through. And Adrian, I should know this right off the top of my head. If I remember correctly, the current numbers are that Chapman would like to grow from the 8,900 students that they have now to approximately 11,900 students.
The last number I heard was like 10,500. So it's about 11,000. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
But they're also, on top of that, that's full-time students. So one full-time, they're wanting to define one full-time student
that
equals
is correct.
2 part-time students.
Right.
So you could actually have a lot more bodies at that 10 or 11,000 number. That's full-time students.
Right.
So you could end up with 15 or 16,000 because part-time versus full-time.
And I think that that's going to be a big area of discussion as we get into that. It's moving. The request for the changes and the updates to their specific plan is currently moving through the city. I think about half of their total request, because it's many chapters, have been already submitted to the city. The other half should be, I think, coming, if I remember correctly, by the end of March, which means that the likelihood it'll be before any of the city bodies, whether it be DRC or Planning Commission or the City Council, will be sometime early summer. So that's certainly going to be an item for discussion.
And not to get into all the planning parts of all of this, but everybody should be engaged on that process. I know our community is, but I commented on, and this is planner talk, and I know that Nathan probably knows some of this, but when Chapman released their notice of preparation, I commented on the issues I wanted them to analyze. And this issue, if it's not properly analyzed, we're going to get another chance to comment on it through this process Arianna is talking about. So it's really, you can see how all this kind of blurs in. We got dorms, we've got Chapman doing a specific plan expansion, and we got ADUs, and it's like all of them are kind of intertwined, and we probably do need to separate them, but because there will be, there are going to be ADUs that aren't, you're going to have property owners who want to build an ADU for their family member, or maybe for a rental for a non-family member, and they're not going to choose to rent to Chapman students because of a choice.
Right.
And
well, that's why I think what Mike is saying is so right on the money. It's really about usage, and we should, as a city, as residents, have the right to ask that, and you should have to be honest. I think it's really interesting. One of the things that happened in terms of the city is that I know code enforcement is getting involved in a number of different ways. They have actually gone out to one of the houses that has been complained about several times that has students living in it already. My understanding, Nate, is that part of our because I've had a number of realtors tell me this, that currently the rules in the city of Orange is that you can only have 2 leases on any given property. But we're talking about, 6, 7, 8 leases already on a property. So, something's
I'm pretty confident from anecdotally from talking to people, and even people commenting over here, some folks I know over on Waverly, for example, that having a lot more than 3 leases on a property is already commonplace. And as we already looked at, under the definition of a communal living, it's still considered a boarding house for the purpose of the zoning. And so whether it's multiple leases or an individual lease is a moot point. It's already not allowed.
Right.
And also the lease issue, I think some of the houses are doing a master lease, that everybody signs a master lease. So there's a lease with multiple signers. And, there's ways around paperwork.
Right.
You go back to the intended use.
Yes.
And it's a boarding house.
Yeah.
And we've had boarding house fights for many years, or going way back, right, Adrian? Like before you were on the Planning Commission years ago.
Forever. They've had boarding house issues forever. And actually, many decades ago, Chapman had fraternity and sorority houses, and where the kids would live, and they had to get rid of all of them. And they literally got rid of them because they had so many problems.
Right.
And that's now, we're building that again. That's where one of our uses are going to happen is we're building this issue with their Greek life.
I mean, you can go by the house in question at 570 North Cambridge and see beer cans out on the front yard every morning. Right. I mean, you can't tell me it's not it doesn't matter if it's a Tuesday night, it's a party house.
Right.
Well, and they've been in 2 weeks, and this really is not a student bashing night. This is
that is correct.
We should young Lewin bashing night, but the police have been out, multiple times in the 2 weeks they've been there. Chapman Security's been there. So it's something that's building. It really is building.
And with that, I do want to share a number with you before I do a couple more questions. So it was interesting in my chat with Chapman and some of the answers they have given to residents. So there is no direct line to call Chapman Public Safety, and if one of their student houses is having a problem, they have no jurisdiction outside of the actual campus. So unfortunately, that then ties in our Orange Police Department, which, what a terrible use of our resources to have them break up a party. But there are several questions that have popped up about if we live next to one of these houses, what do we do? What can we do in this fight? So Mike has some very specific things, but I want to share at least 2 things with you, is that if you're having parties, we need to report. And that doesn't mean that we need to call in and, call 911 and force our police department to come out all the time. Obviously, there are going to be extreme situations where you do need to call 911. However, what you can do is call the city's non-emergency line at the police department. And again, we will put this up later, but that number is 714-744-7444. So 714-744-7444. And the reason you would call, and we're just going to have to get in the habit, call, be respectful, let them know you're calling about, a house that is, Adrian, how would we term it? So a disturbance house, a house that's causing a disturbance. And you would just like to report it. Yeah, a nuisance house.
Yeah.
It's a nuisance.
Because that reporting generates and starts building that record that we need as data to show that there is a serious problem.
You have the right to expect quiet and peace in your neighborhood.
Absolutely.
And the reality is, if you give them we all want to give everybody a break.
Of course.
But at some point, you have to decide, okay, it's time to start making phone calls. Yeah. And you employ your neighbors so that they make the calls also. And actually, you can call Chapman Security because they have an honor code. And quite often they come out with Orange PD, but you're welcome to call Chapman Security and say, hey, there's an issue with a bunch of Chapman students at this address. And they have a number also, which is 714-997-6763. And they welcome your phone calls if there's an issue. They were out yesterday with Orange PD at a house.
Can you repeat that number, Mike?
714-997-6763. And much like the OPD number that you gave out, that goes to dispatch. That's a dispatch number. And they'll come out and discuss it with the kids because they have an honor code that they have to abide by. And they get so many complaints, and they get called to their whatever internal discipline board that they have to deal with. So, I mean, it's trying to let everybody have a nice environment to live in.
A number of people have asked about whether or not we could look at parking restrictions. We talked about that a little while earlier, that, that certainly would be one way to, while the ADU laws say you don't have to provide for housing, or you don't have to provide for parking. Parking can be restrictive, as most of us know in the area about what
Yeah.
that looks like, or try to find a parking space on street sweeping day. So, but that is certainly a creative angle. And I said I would, but I hadn't gotten to it. Certainly some of the things that the city and the city manager will be talking about next Tuesday will be, can we do administrative design review that verifies the use? Can we put overlays in that administrative design specific to the Eichler or the Old Town neighborhoods, which is a nice idea, but I want to make sure that everyone's protected, that it's not strictly for the historic areas. Because this is, as Mike, you've seen, a lot of this is taking place just across the way of the historic district, and that's a problem.
Within feet of Old
So,
Town.
and my guess is that that's not an accident. So,
No, absolutely not.
yeah. Nate, you've mentioned a couple of times CUPs. So looking at that and seeing if that's an area that we can do, certainly going back and readdressing the boarding house issue. But a lot of this is going to come down to, even if we put any and all of these restrictions in, our code enforcement. And that is a problem for our city.
Yeah,
Well,
I agree.
we have no
That's a big
code
problem. The rules are already there. The laws are already there. All we need to do is enforce them. I don't know. Again, I think I said this. It's just baffling to me how this has been allowed to go on.
And Arianna, we have very few code enforcement officers. And in my recent communication, it takes 10 days from the time you report something for them to do anything, because they're so backed up. So maybe there's some resources at the city level that could be reassigned to more code enforcement officers to take care of some of this stuff. I get calling building department and all is much quicker, but code enforcement takes 10 days. So by that time,
right,
I'm just saying.
The problem you're calling about may not necessarily still be going on. And
they're stuck on that, unfortunately. And I think that's in the city, that's something that more money could be spent on.
Right.
So, and
I'd certainly rather spend that money than to waste the time of our police officers. So,
right.
Yeah.
And that's a good point. The city of Orange, we're going to be 100 and we're going to be getting close to our sesquicentennial year in 22 when we were founded. We're a big city now. We can still have our small town values, which we love, but we're going to probably build out at about 150,000 people maybe. But that's not much further than we are right now. We're practically built out. So when you're practically built out, what you do as a city is you turn into proactive code enforcement, lots of neighborhood protection, lots of neighborhood focus, and you really strengthen those neighborhoods with good oversight. And yes, code enforcement process is time consuming. You got to give property owners a lot of due diligence and a lot of time to fix things. I did it as now I'm a retired city planner, but you've got to go through due diligence and due process and let people fix things before you yank away their conditional use permit. You've got to go give them a chance to behave. You coerce them. And then if they don't, which we did with the junior motel, you take it away.
Right.
So it is totally within our bounds.
Which proves that, if there is political will, it could be done.
True. And the last thing I want to share with that is, because we're behind, we were not the leading city in adopting our own local ordinance with ADUs. We have a bunch of other cities that have already adopted ones. We can look at what toolkit that they had.
Right.
And I would specifically suggest, we know there are other wonderful cities like us that have a great university in town. UCLA, USC, Berkeley, San Diego. What are they doing?
Right.
With these types of, how are they coming up with solutions that can help with things? And let us learn from them too, and tailor it. The thing with bashing the state, which is what I'm going to finish with, is that the state has their goals because they're thinking at 50,000 feet. We just have to tell them our model will work and get you what you want, and then they'll leave us alone.
Right.
Well,
Well, here's another question that I don't know the answer to, and maybe Nate or Adrian, you do. There is a question about why don't we use administrative citation? And I plead a little bit of ignorance on that. I know I have looked into that.
Ain't that the $1 million question? Why don't they?
So,
Well,
but can you explain what that is and how is it different from what we have now?
we don't issue a ticket when we see a violation. Our code enforcement officer should have the authority to issue you a citation on the spot if there's a code violation.
So that would be another tool in the arsenal, so to speak. if the city
Absolutely.
enacted it.
And most people, I mean, I've never had a speeding ticket in my entire life. I'm just
No way.
I can't claim that same honor. I will readily admit.
I think most people are rule followers. So if I were to get a ticket, I'm probably not going to do that again or think twice. So we need administrative code enforcement. It ratchets up. It should be really expensive. It should be painful. And yes, we are not using a tool that can totally help with not just this issue. And that's back to what I said a few minutes ago. We're practically built out. We need to really let our code enforcement staff do their jobs. And there's there's a process. I mean, if it's not true, if a complaint is not true on any matter, it is easy to find out. And if it's just somebody that's complaining that's wrong, we can address it. But I am disheartened when we just kind of passively go, I don't know what's happening. And oh my gosh, we could be much more engaged in a predictable outcome for our own city. And I think our community expects that. It's a high bar. It's a high bar.
And I think that's one of the interesting things about this issue is as much as it's an awful issue that we have to deal with. I think with Nate, what you've done and just reviewing, the thing, but, Mike, what you have done is, to me, it really shows that if we kind of open the doors at City Hall and build coalitions and bring people to bear on these issues, that they will come up with creative, good solutions, and we can do it. We can do it because there is a collective will when we open the doors and we work together.
A task force, yes.
That's certainly something that I would like to call for, because like I said, while we've talked about some things that we can do for solutions, this is a complex issue. It's not going to be solved tomorrow, and it's not going to be solved by throwing our hands up in the air. So what do we do now? Mike, I would love for you to share what you've been putting together to bring neighbors together and kind of create that bigger collective voice.
Well, we're getting a lot of people that want email updates. We've got a website coming, stopthedorms.com. We're talking to our neighbors. We're standing out in the front lawn and talking to people walking by. We're calling the people we know. We're getting in touch with all of our city leaders, our city staff, the people that we rub elbows with from time to time, the people that we know from service groups and volunteerism. We're talking to everyone and realizing that, yeah, they have an issue with this. I have an issue with that. They have an issue with this. Getting the word out, getting some momentum going, get that rock rolling down the hill. And we're looking to the bottom line is we're looking to our city leaders to take some of this information and create an ordinance, write it, get it passed, and go forward. And Arianna, that's where you come in.
That's where I come in.
You're new on the board. You're new on the council, and so I've got the lighter, and we're holding your feet to the fire here. I literally, because
completely understand.
if you drop the ball on this,
yes, sir,
we're gonna have some issues. But, and I say that in all levity, but you know,
But
I've talked
on a
to
serious
5
note,
out of the 7 council members, and no one likes this, but honestly, it's only 3 weeks old for us, but I haven't seen anything proactive done yet except this. And this is
but look
just
at
a
it this way.
discussion.
It's only been 3 weeks, but look at how much has already happened. And
Yeah, but
I don't
I
mean in
don't have
terms
any
of like,
patience.
but I don't know, but I'm saying that's why to me it's so important that we get moving on this, because in the 3 weeks, it is absolutely astonishing to me how many people have all of a sudden said, well, wait a minute, there's like construction that just suddenly started up in my neighborhood and in this neighborhood and in that neighborhood, and fencing went up. And you know, I wonder if the, you know, the investors, because I know you had a run-in with them, Mike, you know, are
Yep.
starting to run as fast as they can to get some of these properties completed and get people in.
Well, and some of the response, obviously, from Facebook and the groups and the emails, the phrase that kind of grinds me is, you should do this, you should do that. And you know, granted, I'll do all the stuff I can, but everybody needs to be doing this and everybody needs to be doing that. Don't assume that I'm going to speak on your behalf as a neighbor. You need to go talk to your council members, your mayor, your city manager, your building department. You need to do these things too. Code
Right.
enforcement,
Yeah.
Chapman, the people that you know. And I find that, you know, the people that I know throughout the city, all of a sudden I can make a phone call or send an email and they'll at least listen to me. I pull that out for everyone in the city.
And to
Contact
that
who you-
point, we're over our hour, so we're just about a quarter past the hour right now. And I want to make sure everybody has some of the resources that we have. So as I was doing my research, and I'm going to share my screen real quick so everybody can see it if I can find it. Let's see. And I probably can't find it, but there we go. Town hall resources. So give me just a second. So these, nope, that was the Chapman one, wrong. Oh no, there it is. Okay. These were a couple of interesting websites that I wanted to share with everybody, because they were really specific to, and I think I just stopped sharing it. Hold on. Excuse me just a minute while I figure out my own technology. So there we go. So there are 2 active campaigns going on right now that are addressing these particular types of housing issues that they're, as Adrian said, they're bad planning and they're bad for California residents. So the first one is being run by a city council member out of Torrance, and it's California Cities for Local Control. So he is trying to build a movement in order to get people to have to give control back to the cities to decide these types of zoning, housing rules for themselves, that we can come to a compromise and do what's in the best interest of neighborhoods and our neighbors. The second one, which I found really, really interesting, and if you want more information on RENA, the regional housing numbers, and if you want to kind of understand how they jumped or almost, you know, that they doubled over the last couple of years and what's really kind of driving some of this legislation, is livablecalifornia.org. So there were some great presentations, some really good in-depth research that was really interesting, and also information about what's coming next, which is where I got the information on SB 9 and SB 10. And then secondly, to Mike's point, city council at cityoforange.org will hit every single one of your elected city council people. And trust me, we are getting your emails. They are coming in a flood. And, you know, I know people probably think that we're not reading them. I can't speak for everyone, but I'm seeing them. I'm reading them. I look at them as they're a gold mine of questions, of stories, and those are the things we need to take to other elected representatives, which leads me to our state reps. So Assemblyman Stephen Choi, who serves kind of the eastern part of Orange, Assemblyman Tom Daly, who has a very small part of Orange down on the west side, and our new state senator, Dave Min, all need to hear from you. So on the website that Mike is building for stopthedorms.com, and on my own website, and on my Facebook pages, I will post this information with links of how you can reach out and contact these folks. It is, I don't want to undersell how valuable it is to our state representatives when they hear from local people, and especially if they hear about a certain issue, because they may not live in this city, but they know our cities and they know them well. So when they hear from folks, it is a powerful incentive for them to ask good questions of the people who are doing these kinds of rules at Sacramento. Let's see, did I miss anything, guys? Is there anything else?
We have our loose knit group, Nate and I, and the local neighbors have a new new email address. It's stopthedorms@gmail.com. That's stopthedorms@gmail.com. If anybody would like to get on our mailing list, our email list, I should say, to keep up to date, and we can send information out to as things come up, we're welcome to do that. You're welcome to do that. And to keep the information flowing. And again, I can only say as strongly as possible, talk to everybody you know, talk to your neighbors, your elected officials, bend their ear, burn their ear. The squeaky wheel gets the oil, all those things. You've got to do it, because Nate and I and 3 or 4 other people talking aren't going to get it done.
You're
It's
absolutely right.
all of the people doing this.
Well, and so many of the comments too about our fellow neighbors, that these are our neighbors. If we don't look out for each other, no one's going to look out for us.
And we're all, I've been in this house for over 30 years. We have one neighbor across the street that's been in for probably 70 years. Nate's been in for,
I've only been here 13 years. I'm the new guy.
Oh, you're
Yeah,
a
so
newbie.
he's a baby. He's a baby, but Steve and Peter, everybody's got decades in. They don't want, they don't need this frustration and these problems. We want to just have a nice, easy, normal neighborhood.
Right.
And we all have Chapman kids around us, and we
Yes.
can all deal with that. But once we get these mini dorms, it's a whole different animal.
You're 100% right.
So,
Well,
this-
guys,
this
just
really
thank
is
you
not-
so much for joining me. And so for anyone watching, we are recording this whole thing, so we will post it later, and we'll add some of these resources at the end so people can have them. And we're saving the chats so that we don't miss anybody. If there's questions we need to follow up with, we will do that after. And please know that we will do this again, probably in the very near future, particularly if we can get some of our state representatives to talk with us, because I think that will be a very interesting conversation. But until then, everyone stay safe, and thank you so much. Oh, wait, I'm sorry, Nate, go ahead.
Just one thing, can you give us the information about the time and how to access the city council meeting on Tuesday?
Oh, good question. So our city council meeting on Tuesday is going to be a long one already, but you need to submit council comments for city council before 11 a.m. The day of that council meeting. Am I right, Adrian? Do I have that right? Is that the new rule? Yes. So,
Yes, one of my cats just jumped up on the table here. She's knocking my halo light. Yes.
no problem. So it's 11 a.m. and if you go to the city website, and I think it's now on the homepage, but it's definitely on the city clerk's page on the website, and that's cityoforange.org. There's a button that says council comment, and you can put it there.
It has
And the link to the actual council meeting is on the homepage also.
That is correct.
And ironically, since I've been on this call, it just landed in my inbox. So the link could go to the council agenda has been released.
Awesome.
Yes.
It's there.
Yes, so our agenda is there, and you'll see that we have a very big, full agenda. But and you actually bring a good point about comments. So from our last meeting, we are going to be doing a hybrid version of comments. And Councilman John Dimitru just sent me a message just saying that people, if you want to come out and do live comments, you can do that in person. So we will have social distancing in place, and this would be at the council chambers. We're still doing it by teleconference, but the council chambers will be open to allow for live public comments. So if you're interested, you can certainly do that. I will remind everybody that at this upcoming council meeting, we have 75 unread public comments from our previous meeting. So it's going to be a very long evening. You can also, there is a phone number with the city clerk. You can leave a voicemail message and that will be played. So, so there are a lot of different opportunities to comment. But again, please be reassured that if you're sending a letter into the council, we are receiving those.
Well, and the big backlog at this next meeting is going to be the short-term rental issue, and the short-term rental Short-Term Rental Association of Orange, whatever it's called, has contacted us also and are very concerned about these ADUs and the college dorms and how it affects their issues that they've got to, address coming up, negatively affecting them.
I actually think that brings up a good opportunity for, again, creative thinking, collaboration. There are lots of things we could ask for them. So, but I don't want to go on too much. We could go on for hours. I think there is so much meat on this bone. But for those of you asking, should we come out to City Council with the items that the city manager is going to be bringing forward on Tuesday? I think it's going to be a good time to listen. I think the city council has very much gotten the message that this is not going to be a problem that goes away and it needs to be addressed. But listen to the different types of alternatives that he's bringing up, and it will be coming back to the council because if we're going to consider any ordinance, we have to have a lengthy discussion about that. We may give them some direction, but we won't get into the meat and potatoes of an ordinance until a following meeting.
Yeah, it'll go to the planning commission, so there'll be a lot of opportunities. And again,
lots of opportunities.
One of the things we've learned with this process, and I think Arianna, you touched on it, the engagement component, it's just been missing, and we just gotta get that revved up and get our community involved. And I really think Mike hit the nail on the head, which is we have to be our own champions. I know Arianna, I don't live in District 1, I live in District 6, but I know she cares about Olive Orange, but I don't want to just dump everything on her back to carry. I want all of our community to get engaged, come along and, learn all of this stuff, learn it. It's going to take some work to learn all of it. Read it. I mean, Nate read, I'm a planner. I've read code my entire career. It's right there. It's in black and white.
Yeah, I'm not a lawyer and I'm not a planner, but I'm an engineer, and I've been reading contract documents and specifications for decades, and it's all right there in front of you in black and white, what you can't do.
Yeah. So that's where we can be the people that can be the squeaky wheel, and it'll make it easier for our council people.
And a lot of those code links will be on the stopthedorms.com when it's up. So people can go read that.
So lots to be looking out for. People can sign up for the newsletters if they send you an email. Yep. So anyways, thank you all so much for joining me this evening, and we will not wait too long before we do it again, because I have a feeling a lot will be moving with this issue going forward.
Definitely.
Cool. Thanks for hosting this, Arianna.
Thank you for everybody who was watching, and we will keep you posted with all the links we said.